Hi guys, this is Purti from Leverage Edu. Thank you so much for joining here today. And in this session, we'll be talking about IELTS speaking, which is a major part of your IELTS exam. 1/4 of your marks depend on this. So you know that you're going to get a band score, which will reflect on your application as well. And a part of it is IELTS. So today our webinar is focused on that. So just to start off with things, my name is Purti. I'll be taking this session for you. I'm the IELTS manager here at Leverage Edu. And apart from all your help with applications, we also provide help with test prep here. Today is all about IELTS speaking, and we'll talk about all sort of questions that you will get in the exam and how to go about answering it and how to go about answering it confidently. So starting with first thing is, what sort of pattern and questions you get for the speaking section. So the structure of the exam, that is. This exam, this speaking section will be for 11 to 14 minutes. And you'll have to go to the test center and meet the examiner for a face-to-face interaction. So that's what it is going to be. Now, even if you choose, the computer-based test, which is how the second way in which you can take your exam, you'd still have to go to the test center and meet the examiner. So for some, it can be a daunting task, just because probably they're not prepared for it or they don't know how to go about the exam. But the best part about it is that they're not there to check, your technical knowledge about something, or they're not going to ask you questions to assess how much you know about something. But it's all everyday issues, things which are about you and around you. So when you know this fact, half the things are already in place for us, because then we know that, at least the kinds of questions that they will ask us will be about ourselves and things around us. So work, study, your friends, things that you do at the weekend, or your habits, or let's say about your things which are around you. So your neighborhood, your city, trees, birds, animals, all of that. So you don't have to worry about the fact that there might be a question where you don't know anything about. So this, knowing this fact at least should give you a sort of a relief. And then on top of that, of course, there is help with contextual vocabulary, idioms, and because these are about you, your experiences, you are more confident in talking about them. So they're not going to ask you something about, let's say, cryptocurrency, for instance. So you don't have to worry about not knowing certain things. And throughout the exam, they do you, with the same questions. Of course, in different parts, they ask you about different kinds of questions, and they are trying to check your ability for different kinds of answers. But the topics remain the same, which is about you, things which are around you, your opinions and your feelings. So, in part one, they start out with two topics. One is always about your hometown, work or study. And they will ask you 4 to 5 questions, which is, around 4 to 5 minutes. And here you are expected to speak for about 3 to 5 sentences, but not beyond that, and not less than that as well. So you can't give one line, one word answers. And then they'll move on to part 2, which is a long-term cue card round. And here they ask you about a topic. All of these topics which they ask you will be around your experiences, and some sort of description is what you are supposed to give. So because they are based on your experiences, could be about the past experiences generally, or things you want to experience, about places, people, events, activities. They expect you to come up with a certain extent, a length of the answer. And in part 2, especially, they are checking your ability to develop answers and talk about something which you have already dealt with, or like the back of your hand, because you've already experienced it. So talk about all of this up to a certain length. So in the exam, the examiner will tell you 1 to 2 minutes, but it is always better if you go on speaking for the entire length, for 2 minutes. And whenever the time gets over, the examiner will stop you and you just pause there. By the time this, the duration ends, you should be able to answer the main question which they give you. So we'll just also talk about that in detail. After this, sometimes they also give you a follow-up question, and sometimes they don't. Depends on the examiner and what sort of answers you are giving. If they feel that you have answered sufficiently, so they just move on. If they want to hear some more, so they'll ask you a question. But this also will be like a direct part one question. And after this is the third part or the final section of your exam, where it's called a discussion round, and the examiner will pick up the same theme or the topic from part 2, but they'll ask more general abstract questions. So in part 2 they're asking about a book that you have recently read. So in part 3 they'll ask about reading and writing as skills. What sort of reading skills do children need to inculcate? How often or how early do you think they should start? So they want to check here if you can present arguments or ideas or not. And this part also lasts for 4 to 5 minutes. So 4 to 5 part 1, about 3 minutes is part 2, and 4 to 5. So in total you have around 11 to 14 minutes, and the examiner is managing the time. They are the ones maneuvering it. You don't have to worry about let's say looking at the clock, or you have to also keep a track on how much are you speaking. All of that is not applicable here in the exam. You are not even allowed to wear a watch, by the way. So you also just if you keep worrying about and looking at the time instead of giving answers and focusing on what you're saying, you just end up messing it up. So it's always better to be confident about what you're saying, be cool and calm, and for as much as possible give well-rounded, fluent answers, natural answers, instead of focusing on how many sentences have you spoken for. And all of this will come naturally to you when you are practicing it. So you would know, if I'm speaking 3 4 sentences, I'm done with part 1. If I'm taking 4 5 ideas and elaborating on them, I am able to speak for this much time in part 2. And with practice it will come to you. You don't have to focus a lot on the time. So just okay, so once we know this structure of the exam and we know what sort of questions will be asked from us, then the next thing to think about is how to go about preparing for it, and what sort of things are they going to check you on. Is there a right or wrong answer? What is it that I have to actually say in order to get a certain band? So first, of course, anything above 7 is considered a good score, and getting a 7 band in speaking is not a big deal, unless of course you have to follow a certain protocols and guidelines on which they are assessing you. But the thing here is they're not checking your knowledge and they're not checking your honesty. Okay, so you don't always have to, let's say, just stick to your reality or talk about experiences from your life. Instead, you can, and you have to, you should, you must come up with points from, let's say, some movie that you have seen, or talking about your friends, something that they have told you, any kind of experience that you can imagine, or you think, if this happens to me, this is what I will do, or I will do this and feel this and all of that. So creating and imagining is a big part of your entire exam, so that you're not just restricted to your own points and you end up speaking for a couple of sentences. A very crucial mistake that students do is they think that this isn't something that I've experienced, so can I change the question, or I'm not going to say anything on this because I've not experienced it. But this is what exactly the examiner is checking you. These are all familiar topics. Even if you've not experienced it in real life, can you still talk about something? And this is where then these classes with us are going to help you. I'll tell you how to answer even questions which you have no idea on, and how to extend them, how to not just stop at one line or one sentence. And some of those we'll discuss even here in this session. Okay, so tips to, just keep in mind when you are taking the exam or when you're practicing for speaking is to stop, worrying about what sort of ideas you have to present and will you be judged or assessed on those. So that's a big no. You don't have to worry about it because you're not being checked on that. You are only checked on the language aspect of it. So how you are presenting your arguments, but what you're saying is hardly of the matter. So sometimes students think that, they can't, let's say, disagree with the examiner. They always have to give a positive answer. That isn't true at all. In fact, you keep a balance among these. For some, you're giving a positive, for some, you're not, so that you can also show to the examiner that that's the kind of language as well that you can use. You can't just give an answer, affirmative answer, and say yes, yes, yes. You also give a negative one and show that language too. Even if in real life you might not disagree with it, but it's always good to keep in mind the various ways in which you can answer to the examiner so that you show that range to them. Then, of course, using contextual vocabulary and linkers so that you don't end up repeating your words, so that you have a connection between whatever you are saying. So, firstly, of course, the ideas which you'll put across could be yes, no, or whatever you want to say, and then how you are developing those ideas. So, linkers and transitional words are something that we use in order to, have that connection between what we are saying. And this is not just for IELTS, this is for otherwise also in English. If you listen to native speakers or even otherwise, we speak with certain linkers in mind so that the person listening to us can follow our arguments properly. And that's exactly what they are checking here. So yes, you need to be aware of those linkers and what sort of words you need to use. And we provide you here with those full-fledged, PDF for it. So you keep going through it, you use it, we discuss ideas in the class of how to use it, but this is something that they are checking in vocabulary and something that you've got to use, which is linkers and, signposting transitional words. And then, this practice of developing ideas is something that you need to do. Because sometimes, yes, agreed, there might be questions that you are not aware of, even if they're everyday topics, but something unfamiliar comes to you. And because you have to answer immediately, you might end up just pausing altogether and you have no idea how to go about it. So, which is why that practice for developing ideas is necessary. So, we know some common and recent exam questions and we discuss all of that so that you, if there's something that you don't know, you end up learning about it. And then also on top of this, not just for those particular topics, also for any idea that, any topic that can come to you, once you understand how to answer, you will be able to answer any question. Apart from this, also using some sort of, native speakers tactics so that you are able to not go quiet or show to the examiner that you are well aware of all of this. So for instance, one of the tactics which they use is, using fillers or creating that thinking time for yourself. So suppose there's a question which comes to you and you are blown away by it, you don't know what to say. You need just that 1-2 second gap to gather your thoughts. So then we use words like, let me try to remember, or you can say, well, that was a long time back, let me see, or just, that's a pretty unusual question, give me a second to think about it. You can say all of this. One, of course, not for every question, but for some questions you can definitely do this. Instead of keeping quiet and being silent, it's always better to use these phrases which fill that time and that awkward pause that you might have. So, you at the back of your mind, you're thinking of ideas. Okay, this is what I'll say, or this is what I should say. And just so that you don't keep silent in that 1 or 2 seconds, you use these phrases and you create that thinking time for yourself. So this is one thing which native speakers do. And then there's things like asking questions to yourself. Like things like, suppose they ask you a question and you are listing down points. So you're saying, what else was there? Let's see. So you say this question, what else was there? What did I do then? Let's see. So when you're saying this, of course, you're at the back of your mind thinking, but just to show to the examiner that you're very comfortable, you're confident with the language. You're not pausing because you're not getting words, but you're pausing because you are probably gathering ideas in your head, which is not going to cut down on your fluency score. So they cut down, fluency only when you are not able to come up with certain words. If in the middle of speaking or in the middle of your answer, you are pausing because you are not finding or not able to get words, then that's going to affect your fluency. However, if you're pausing for a second or two, of course, in between for ideas, what to say next, one, by using these fillers, you fill that time, and second, it's still not going to affect you or affect your score or bring it down. That you can do as long as you're not hesitating, you're not self-correcting yourself or repeating your words. So sometimes students, while giving the answer, they repeat their sentences and then move on to the next part. This is something you shouldn't do, and in order to avoid this, which is why fillers come into the picture. Then of course, don't stick to your reality. Let your imagination run wild. Make up scenarios if you want to give an answer and if you want to extend and develop. Of course, keeping in the grammar in check and making sure that you're making use of different tenses and using them accurately, because grammar also accounts for 25% of your score. And a very nice way of extending your answer is by giving lots of examples, personal examples about yourself, your family, friends, neighbors, people in your city, your colleagues, your peers, so that this is, whenever you're falling short of ideas, if you just furnish an example with it, the examiner would know that you are okay, able to connect your ideas. You are, of course, speaking a couple of sentences and you're not hesitating or you're not going quiet, which is a big blunder in speaking. And all of this, of course, comes naturally to you when you practice. So there's no shortcut for that. You will have to practice and follow certain more guidelines which we do in the classes. So, starting with different parts of the exam now, and I'll tell you how to answer questions. Okay, so there are many ways, numerous ways in which you can extend part 1 answers right now, the ones where they ask you direct personal questions. The first way is that you use adverbs of frequency. So these are words like usually, never, always, quite often, mostly, occasionally, generally, hardly ever, more often than not. These words will tell you or help you to extend your answer. And let me tell you how. Let me give this example to you. So whatever question, whatever topic in part 1 you're getting, you can use these and tell the examiner how frequently you do this activity. So for instance, this question, in what ways do you try to stay healthy? So suppose, very quickly you are able to only get one idea. So by exercising or eating healthy, green leafy vegetables and lots of fruits and water, all of that. So you just use the adverb and say, this is what I do. So something like, I try to have a balanced diet as often as I can. So I usually drink 10 glasses of water every day, along with, of course, eating fruits and vegetables. I make sure that they are a part of my diet. And very often I also end up having cheat meals or cheat days. I admit that I'm not always conscious about my health, but I try as much as I can. So saying words like as often, every day, I'm not always, conscious of it. This need not be true, but you've got to keep these words in your mind and frame your answer around them. You have to remember that, okay, these are the words that I will use, and whatever question they're asking you, you use these words instead of probably giving a real answer where you're not taking care of health, which also, by the way, you can say using the same adverbs of frequency. So things like I am not as health conscious as I used to be. Very often I end up eating junk food, and I take a lot of sweet drinks and sodas as well. I've been trying every weekend to play a sport just to cut down on my fat, but until now I haven't been able to manage it quite often. But let's see how it goes. So even it can be a no, it can be a yes. One way in which you can extend is by using these adverbs. Then another way in which you can answer part one question is by contrasting your present with your past. So using words of the past. So saying, I used to, or the past tense of the word. So for instance, they ask you a question, do you and your friends eat junk food? So instead of saying a yes and answering in that way, one way of doing it is that you take them to the past first. So, I used to eat a lot of junk food and unhealthy food when I was in school and college. So every day, literally, my friends and I used to hang out to these small stalls and cafes near my college. So we used to gorge on various foods which were tasty but definitely oily and not healthy. However, now I'm becoming more alert and conscious about my health, so I don't indulge in them anymore. So contrasting your past with your present. So any question that you're getting in part one, you can take them to the past first. So, do you play sports or do you like sports? Well, I do. Actually, I was also my school captain of the football team, and we always used to go for competitions, and of course, we ended up winning. However, after college, because of my work, I don't get a lot of time, so now I'm not able to play as much as I would like to. So again, you took them to the past, and now you're contrasting with the present and saying that now I don't. Or if you're taking them to the past, you can still say that I am continuing the same. Even now I've joined a sports club near my house, and I ensure that at least twice in a week I end up playing a couple of my favorite sports or games. So one is using adverbs of frequency and elaborating. Two is by talking about the past, comparing with with the present, or just continuing with the same pattern or trend. And then there's another one which is giving reasons, adding why, even when the examiner is not asking you. So usually when you're talking about your preferences, likes or dislikes, this is where you add a reason. So using words like because, as, the main reason, why I like doing is this, or since, or due to, any of these words. So ensure that you're using them in variety, in a range. So something like, so part one question, would you rather watch a film or read in your free time? So you'd say, oh, I'd much rather distract myself with a great thriller movie than read. Because by the time I get home, I am just shattered. I'm too tired to spend my time and energy on reading. I know most of the movies, they leave less to the imagination instead of books. So I resort to them. And I usually end up in my bed, curling up in my quilt and watching films late till night. So using adverbs here as well. Of course, having, doesn't mean that you can only use one for one answer and other for other. You can also mix these up. So just telling the examiner, the reason why you do something. Sometimes if they ask you something you like, or they ask you to choose something or your preferences, and you end up giving a one line or two line answer, they'll ask you why as well. So never give them this chance to ask you a why. Always, when you're talking about your likes or something that you do in a certain way or you think in a certain way, give them a reason why. So these are just, three ways in which you can extend your answer. There are more, of course, that we discuss in the classes. Any sort of question that you encounter in part one, like I already said, they are about you. You can extend it based on these. But for you to do this, it's always important that you don't just stick to your reality. Have these words, these points in your mind, and then use them to give an answer rather than the other way around. Okay, going to part two now quickly. So this is this is the part of the exam where the examiner will, just sit back for the first time and listen to you giving a speech, a talk, let's say. So the question that they always ask you is always some sort of description. Like this question I have, describe a time when you gave advice to others. So in part two, how you answer is that you weave a story, a good one, but you weave a story to the examiner with a beginning, middle, and end. This end, however, is optional. Even if you're in the middle of the sentence, or middle of your story, and you're able to address the main question, like here, the advice that you gave others, and they stop you, that's okay. With time, with practice, you can also see that, if I'm taking these 4 points, I'm able to cover 2 minutes. So it's always better if you're able to, give a conclusion to your talk, let's say, but they'll not cut marks even if you're not able to do, as long as you address your question. So you always have to take the examiner from, through a series of events from one point to the other, and keep adding details on each of these points so that you are able to, cover the duration as well, and you don't end up, speaking for, let's say, 1 minute only or 1.5 minutes. Try for the 2 minute mark and let the examiner stop you. Include details of who, where, when, what, why, how, all these W and H questions so that you're able to cover the points. So if you're saying something like, oh, Riyansh, we have an array of idioms. Of course, when you join the classes, I give you a whole list of them, and not just randomly. I'll give you idioms for people, for your feelings, for certain keywords, describe places, so that you have, but a huge list of them. Some common, some uncommon ones, which you can use. No issue. So in part two, remember, take the examiner from one point to the other. You should have a beginning, which can be a background to the topic, then middle, and then end. The middle meaning the main part of your question, and answering who, where, when, what, how, all these questions. So the same question which I've taken, describe a time you gave advice to others. Now, whenever we, think of some, questions which can be, let's say, abstract, like the advice question, I would advise you to not take something deep or, didactic, let's say, teachings and learnings involved in your IELTS exam especially. Because, something like the advice I gave to somebody was to work hard, or the importance of hard work. I told them to learn this. Something like this can be too vague for you to weave a story on. If you're able to do it, I'm not saying you shouldn't take points like these, you can. But what I'm telling you is sometimes we end up choosing points where we get confused and mixed in our own words only, or we end up falling short of ideas. So if it's about, let's say, importance of hard work, I'm only able to cover 1 minute or 1.5 minutes, for example. So I would always advise you to take something a bit lighter, some sort of skill, a practical skill it could be, where you can weave that story and take the examiner from one point to the other as well. So for instance, like And again, remember, it need not be true. So I've taken this time when I worked as a florist with some stall or company. Now I'm not worked as one, but I just need to tell a scenario or situation where I gave advice. So instead of something vague, I'm taking something concrete. So then, who am I giving the advice to? To customers who are coming to buy flowers. I am at the florist's shop, so that's the situation. I began this, I did this when I was in college. So just to, meet the ends or have some pocket money or something. Then points like what did I give the advice on? So what is different kinds of flowers? What does one stand for? What occasions would which flowers work? And different seasons and colors and what do they? How to ensure that the flowers don't die early? Then why? Why am I doing this? Or why I did this or how did I feel? I didn't have a clue about it. I realized that when people are buying flowers, they have no idea about certain things, how to cut them or how to grow them or how to ensure that they're, like I said, not dying. Then how I felt. So I felt appreciated when people used to thank me for it, or it was very rewarding for me. I actually learned a lot from the owner as well. These are the points, which I will make in that 1 minute of thinking time that I'm getting. So who, what, when, how, why, and I should have that, the storyline in my mind, the structure of my answer. So starting with, of course, you always have to tell the examiner the topic first. So well, there have been many times when I've given and received advice, but if I have to tell you about one time, that would be when I worked at a florist during my college days. And then take them to some background. Don't just start with this is the advice I gave them. Of course, you won't be able to end up filling the 2 minute time. So when I was a student, I had a part-time job at a florist near my home. So every evening after my college used to get over, I used to go there and work for a couple of hours. The customers who came into the shop, would come in and ask me all sort of questions about flowers, and I didn't have any answer initially. I was quite hesitant in answering them. I would end up, referring them to my owner, and I would feel quite bad about it. So partly because I wasn't able to tell them because I was too young or I was shy, but I don't know. I guess I wasn't able to, and I wasn't an expert certainly. However, I quickly started doing it, and I came to realize that a lot of my customers they have no clue about flowers. So I soon started giving them advice about which type of flowers to pick up for what occasion, what do roses or tulips or daffodils stand for, and which type of color schemes to put together, what kind of bouquet would I uh, can make. And I started realizing that on top of this, I'm also telling them, I also told them how to preserve them, how to cut the flowers at a certain angle so that you are able to put them in water and they'll stay for 3-4 days. And I realized that a lot of the people who I was telling all of this didn't really know it. So that gave me even more confidence. And once I got the hang of it, I started giving more or telling more to people, and they were always very thankful towards me. In fact, I've had some people come back to me and tell me how helpful my advice was to them. So I think all in all, it was a very rewarding job for me as well. And you take them from one point, you tell them what the advice was, you're focusing on the main point throughout. Of course, you produce in extra sentences, you give in more information, but don't digress from your main topic. Have a beginning, middle, and end. And which is why I realized that It can't always come naturally, but this is why, the practice in the classes would help to discuss ideas, to discuss what sort of answers you can give. So next time if something, the same question or something similar comes, you will be able to manage it. Of course, Riansh, lexical resources. It does not, however, mean that you have to use only, let's say, high sounding words or better vocabulary. That is definitely there. But vocabulary is also, paraphrasing the question, not repeating the words of the question, using the language for your opinion. So I feel, I think, I thought, once I got hang of it, contrasting things. So however, because, so all of this also form part of your lexical resource. But definitely a range of it, using it accurately, is something we need to aim for. Okay, then our part 3 questions. So this is where, the examiner will ask you broader questions, abstract questions on the topic of part 2. So you always need to ensure that you are paraphrasing the question. That's the first thing. So, what are some of the ways in which people can stop or prevent pollution? Some of the ways in which people can prevent pollution are these. No, you don't have to do this. You can't repeat the words of the question. One is that you introduce synonyms. The second way, if at that point you are not able to think of any, because you can't take, a long pause, so you shorten down the question. Well, some ways are dash, dash, dash. You don't have to some ways for this, this, this. You don't have to do that. So always aim for paraphrasing the question, and as much as possible, no, don't repeat the words or cut them short as and when required. And then for part 3, you have to follow this structure, that you first give your opinion, then give reason for your opinion, and add an example for it. Opinion, of course, would differ according to the question you're getting. You can have opinion for yourself, for other people, agreement, disagreement, but you address the question first and then you add reasons. So suppose, the same question, what are some of the ways? Now you don't have to give them multiple ideas. Okay, you can also talk about one, but you tell that first to the examiner. Well, there could be multiple ways or numerous ways in which people can help, but I think the best one is this. And then you take one and you elaborate on it. Why do you think that's the best way, or how do you think that can be helpful? And of course, in this part also, you add personal examples. Or you can take it from like your society, your country. These are the programs or the things which people around me are doing. So this question, like, do you think social media is changing the way we relate to our friends or family? Now, either the answer again could be a yes, it is positively changing it, or a no, it's negatively affecting us. Doesn't matter what you say, as long as you first tell your opinion and then elaborate, and not repeating the words of the question. So, in some ways, yes, I think so. Language for opinion. Social media helps to build relationship with others, people who are in the foreign land or far away, far-flung areas as well. So it helps you make connections with long lost friends as well. But yeah, on the other hand, we often spend too much time on it, and that can also lead to complete isolation from reality, or we end up just being sitting in a corner and exploring the virtual world instead of the real world. I remember my aunt last year took away, my cousin's iPad because he was just constantly on it. So I guess, there are both pros and cons, and we've got to maintain that balance, and that's crucial. So you talk about both sides, you talk about one, elaborate on that, you give an example to support your argument, and here you've got to ensure that you have that, connection between your ideas as well. Like I said, you can give one point, but then tell the examiner that there are multiple ways, but this is the one I know, or this is the best one. While thinking, while you are speaking, you suppose you think of another idea. So just add to it. Another way in which people can help is this. But these phrases, which are linking words, are crucial. And in part 3, they will be checking for language for your opinion for these linkers actually throughout the answer, throughout the speaking exam. So yeah, that's how you answer it: opinion, reason, example. Okay, so in brief, I've tried to glance upon and touch part 1, 2, and 3 for you guys. Of course, there is a lot more to it. Vocabulary, yes, grammar, vocabulary, 50% of your score depends on it. Connectors, coherence, cohesion, how well you're able to develop your answer, your pronunciation, your clarity of speech, all of that is there. And it all boils down to the fact what sort of guidance you are getting, what sort of vocab you are referring to, and the practice you are doing. Nothing can come to you in a day or two. You need practice for it, and which is where then we at Leverage come into the picture. We have online classes here, and you can log on to the website live.leverageedu.com, and you can also call us up, find out about the classes and all that we are offering to you. Most important thing for scoring a band 8 is to have a balance of all the 4 assessment criteria. You should have fluent answers without hesitations, without repetitions, paraphrasing the question, using a range of vocabulary as well as grammatical structures, and just speaking naturally. Nothing um, mugged up or memorized should come to the examiner. How much time you need to put in also depends on your ability, your language skills. But I think this 1 month of intense practice with us, and then 15 or 1 month of self practice, 15 days or 1 month, good enough time. You don't actually, how should we introduce ourselves to the examiner? That leaves a great impact. You don't have to. They'll just ask you your question, you answer in one sentence. My name's, and you tell your full name. So, for instance, my name's Purti Chawla. After that, they just start with the questions. You don't have to prepare sort of introduction for them. Shreyas, the whole process for best books, well, I think for speaking, there's no one book that I would refer. Of course, I provide you with the material with idioms and language for different topics and sample answers and ideas, grammar, all of that. But otherwise, Cambridge books are something that you should always refer to for the entire exam. Timings for the classes. So we have multiple batches going on: morning, evening, afternoon, 9 to 10:30, 2 to 3:30, 1.5 hour class, 8 to 9:30 in the evening, Monday to Friday, alternative days also. So multiple batches, multiple options are given. Whatever you feel like, you can definitely get into one of these. Praveen, you can give IELTS as many times as you want. There's no limit to that. But of course, try for giving it once and just cracking it with a great score. Dilip, the exam is held every few days. So currently, for paper-based test, you won't get a lot of batches, as in timing in the centers, but computer-based test is open. So twice or thrice, depends on also your city. Northern cities have more days than southern ones, but at least 2 times in a month, you will have the exam. So you can check out the websites, British Council and IDP. That's where you will book your exam, either of these. Okay, guys, so thank you so much. You can definitely also book a trial class. You can understand what sort of language and how we go about in the classes. Visit the website for the same. Call up these numbers to find out more. Thank you so much for joining in today. And I hope I get to see a lot of you in the classes and you take advantage of all that I'm going to offer to you and get that fantastic score in IELTS and start your journey abroad. Oh, by the way, before ending it, we also will provide you with free counseling session. The first one will be free for you. So anything around your applications, which courses to choose, which countries are open, scholarships, you can ask all of that and more. All you need to do is just call us up and speak. Okay, thank you so much for coming. Keep watching this space for more webinars, and we'll also meet again, hopefully, in the classes. Thank you.